That was the part of the audience whereby the gospel was addressed to the Gentiles. This time, let's look at how the evidence to show that Mark's gospel was addressed to the Jews. The first and foremost, when Jesus healed the daughter of a Syrophoenician woman, he had to tell this woman, please, let's first feed the children. Who were the children? The children were the Jews, not the Gentile. So meaning that the gospel was for the Jews, not the Gentiles. Then the 12 disciples of Jesus were all the Jews. None of them was a Gentile. And these 12 represented the 12 tribes of Israel. When you look at the number 12, it has got a lot of significance in the history. Jesus himself was taken to the temple at 12 years. He had the number of disciples who were 12 in number. Then we have the 12 tribes of Israel. Jesus performed a miracle to Jairus' daughter who was 12 years. He also healed the woman who had a problem of blood flow, which had spent for 12 years. And many others, even when they collected the balance of the feeding of 5,000 people, there were 12 baskets. So this number 12 has got a lot of significance in the history of Israel. Then we look at another point. After healing the leper, Jesus instructed this person to go and perform the sacrifice. As it was already been instructed by Moses, that the sacrifices were to be offered so as to remove the impurities. This was the instruction given to the Jews themselves. We also look at Jesus observed the Sabbath day by going to the synagogue for worship. And the synagogue was in the area of the Jews, not the Gentiles. Note that in Jesus' teaching about divorce, he referred to Pharisees, to what Moses had taught them. Meaning that the message was for the Jews. And also the feeding of 5,000 people took place in the area of the Jewish land. This time it was not in the Gentile. The one of Gentile was 4,000 and the one of the Jews was 5,000. Look at the difference in the figure, meaning that it was for the Jews and not the Gentile. The suffering, the death and resurrection plus ascension of Jesus to heaven took place in Jewish land, where these disciples were standing as Jesus was ascending himself to heaven. Even how they tried to mistreat the death, the burying him was also in the area of the Gentile. Even the resurrection, because Jesus resurrected where he was buried from. The appearance of the Moses and Elijah during the transfiguration they appeared in the area of the Jews, not the area of the Gentile. The triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem took place in the area or the land of the Jews. This was not in the land of the Gentile, meaning that the gospel was addressed to the Jews. The baptism of Jesus in the river Jordan also shows that the gospel was for the Jews. Much as part of the river Jordan was also in Gentile, but Jesus was baptized on the side of the Jews' land. The notice which was pinned on the cross, which reads the King of Jews, it was not saying the King of Gentiles. That shows that it was for the Jews, not the Gentile. And that's why they had to put it there, the King of Jews. Note that Jesus is represented as the expected Messiah. They were expecting the Messiah for the Jews, not the Messiah for the Gentiles. Meaning that all the prophecies which was already stated in the Old Testament was already addressing to the Jews and not to the Gentiles. The action of Joseph of Arimathea hurrying to bury the body of Jesus before the Sabbath, it was a kind of trying to observe the laws of the Jews, not the Gentiles, because they did that in the observance of the law. On Sabbath they were not allowed to work, and it was already approaching to the time when the Sabbath was already entering, so they hurried quickly buried him in order to avoid disobedience of the law, breaking of the laws which a Jew was supposed to follow. Thank you for listening to me.